Welcome to AI for All. The AI for All virtual conference is brought to you under the patronage of His Highness Sheikh Khalid bin Hamad Al Khalifa Initiatives and is organized through a collaboration between Bahrain Polytechnic and the Bahrain Institute of Banking and Finance, the BIBF. The conference aims to bring together artificial intelligence industry experts, professionals, and researchers to discuss and share knowledge about the exciting field of AI, its different applications, and how everyone can take advantage of its opportunities and overcome its challenges. On behalf of the BIBF and the Polytechnic, I'm Amal Al-Surani, and I will be your host this morning throughout the conference. Once again, we are delighted to welcome you all to this conference, and your presence really makes way for its success. We have a lineup of renowned local and international experts who will be sharing their perceptions and advice on how to reap the benefits of artificial intelligence. First off, please join me in welcoming Sheikh Hisham bin Abdulaziz Al Khalifa, Board of Trustees Chairman of Bahrain Polytechnic, Board of Trustees Chairman of Governmental Hospitals. Sheikh Hisham, over to you.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it is indeed a pleasure for me to be here today in the opening ceremony of this important conference, focusing on artificial intelligence and its impact on our daily life. I'm honored to be with such a distinguished group of speakers, panelists, and participants who will no doubt enrich this conference with their insights and thoughts over the next 2 days. Special thanks to His Excellency Mr. Rasheed M, Governor of the Central Bank of Bahrain, and our keynote speaker, Dr. Scott Nowson, the Artificial Intelligence Lead at PricewaterhouseCoopers, Middle East. Ladies and gentlemen, technology was invented to better our lives, from the invention of the wheel that opened up travel, trade, and migration many millennia ago to the digital age of today, where we conduct most of our business with a few taps on our phones or keyboards. No doubt service levels and data speed will continue to develop and grow as more advancements in technology are achieved, not in years, but in months or even weeks. Artificial intelligence was a natural development to help us cope and manage these advancements in technology. The potential power of AI could not have been put to the test in a more challenging environment than with COVID-19 pandemic, where it was used as a frontline tool to combat the virus. According to the Washington Post, AI is being used to sort through millions of gigabytes of data to help with the fight against this virus. Today, a year into the outbreak, scientists are starting to make connections that lead to new theories about the virus and how to eradicate it with the help of artificial intelligence. At Northwestern University, a modeling lab is running large-scale simulations on the effect of travel, restrictions and social distancing on infection rates. Closer to us in Egypt, AI is used to counter coronavirus misinformation in the Arabic language. AI has also been front and center in the information dissemination of the World Health Organization. In April of this year, a computer sorting through medical records confirmed that lack of smell and taste, which had been reported mostly anecdotally, were among the earliest symptoms of infection. A discovery that influenced the Centers for Disease and Control Prevention, Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, to add them to its list of COVID-19 symptoms. In Bahrain, the health measures taken by the government to stop the spread of the virus have disrupted important sectors such as health and education. But with the help of artificial intelligence, we have managed to react quickly to our changing circumstances and learn to adapt to them. Being in the education field, we have seen firsthand the challenges faced by schools and higher education institutions due to COVID-19, where students had to adapt quickly to virtual environments as opposed to physical classrooms or lecture halls. The challenge is even more severe for institutions like Bahrain Polytechnic that pride themselves on using applied methods in teaching to give students true workplace experiences to make them work ready by the time they graduate. Bahrain Polytechnic has taken steps to implement this technology within its operations. We were one of the first higher education institutions in Bahrain to implement technology transformation by moving our operations to the cloud. With the power of cloud computing, this digital transformation has benefited the institution in terms of improved accessibility, reduced costs, and increased collaboration for both staff and students. In addition, we have enrolled a number of our staff in our AI Academy, which will allow us to explore opportunities to implement AI technology to help us in our teaching and learning experience, as well as our practical courses. Additionally, we are offering our final year students the opportunity to implement solutions utilizing AI tools for different organizations. For this reason, Bahrain Polytechnic and BIBF have collaborated to host this two-day virtual conference where we aim to bring together industry experts, professionals, and researchers to shed light on the opportunities and challenges we face with artificial intelligence. This conference comes at an opportune time to help realize the directives of His Majesty, King Mohammed bin Isa Al Khalifa, for government sectors to focus on developing the kingdom's digital economy and artificial intelligence capabilities. Hosting this important conference will no doubt have a positive impact on Bahrain and all international participants due to the wealth of local and international experiences present. In conclusion, I would like to take this opportunity to thank His Highness Sheikh Khalid bin Hamad Al Khalifa, First Deputy Chairman of the Supreme Council for Youth and Sports and President of the Bahrain Olympic Committee, for his continuous support of many of Polytechnic's initiatives related to artificial intelligence, such as the Khalid bin Hamad Competition for Innovation in Artificial Intelligence and the inauguration of our AI Academy. We are honored by his support as we align our efforts to meet the goals of Bahrain's 2030 vision. My thanks to all the participants for being with us today, wherever you are located around the globe, and a special thanks to all our distinguished speakers. I wish you all a productive and successful conference. Thank you. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Thank you for your insight, Sheikh Hisham. And now for a word from His Excellency, the Governor of the Central Bank of Bahrain, Chairman of the BIBF, Mr. Rasheed M Maraj. Over to you, Your Excellency.
Thank you, Amel. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Sheikh Hisham bin Abdulaziz Al Khalifa, distinguished guests and participants, good morning. And on behalf of BIBF, I would like to welcome you all and to thank His Highness Sheikh Khalid bin Hamad Al Khalifa, Deputy Chairman of the Supreme Council of Youth and Sport, for patronizing this event. The theme of the conference on artificial intelligence reflects the increasing importance of such evolving technology in our lives. In his opening speech to the current session of Parliament and Shura Council, His Majesty King Mohammed bin Isa Al Khalifa highlighted the importance of the application of AI in the economy and the urgency to put in place the right infrastructure for the effective use of this technology. I am pleased to see BIBF taking the initiative to organize this conference in collaboration with Bahrain Polytech, and look forward to see more events on this topic to attract more interest from a wider section of the society. The evolving new technology across a wide range of fields will bring disruption and a new business model, which makes it imperative on us to get ready for these technological challenges. Banking sector, as an example, is going to be under threat as a result of the new trends in digital banking, payment, and electronic and settlement systems. Artificial intelligence will be the driver of these new innovations. In conclusion, I would like to thank again the patron of this conference, His Highness Sheikh Khalid bin Hamad Al Khalifa, to the organizers, the panelists, and all the participants. And I wish you a successful and useful conference. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency. And now we are delighted to introduce our keynote speaker, who will be addressing trends in artificial intelligence from a global and regional perspective. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Scott Nowson, Artificial Intelligence Lead, PwC Middle East. Over to you, Dr. Scott.
Thank you, and salam alaikum. Good morning, excellencies, ladies, gentlemen. It is my great privilege and honor to be with you here today. So I would like to thank the organizing committee and all the sponsors of the event for inviting me here today. Now, let me share my screen with you so that you can see what some of the material that I want to bring with you today. So my name is Dr. Scott Nowson, and I do AI. And what I mean by that is that I've pretty much spent my entire adult life, the last 25 years, studying, researching, implementing AI across the globe. I live and breathe and think AI, and particularly natural language processing and machine learning. Those are my speciality areas. And as PwC Middle East AI lead, it's my job to help shape AI in the region. As you've already heard, it is one of the most critical factors in our future. And so what I want to do today is talk about some of the trends that we're seeing in AI globally, how to make it a success, and what AI really means to the region. So AI means many things to many different people. Elon Musk, for example, talks a lot about the risks and dangers of AI and the dystopian future that it can create. There are others who talk about the utopia and what a positive benefit it can be to society. Me, having been in this for so long, and somewhere in the middle, cautiously optimistic. So today I want to talk to you about three things. First, and very briefly, I want to touch on what is AI. Now, this is an AI conference. We all have an understanding of what it is, but I should say I start every conversation in this way because it's always important to align on a few key areas, but I will go quickly on this. I then want to talk about some of the ways that we believe organizations and governments can truly unlock AI's potential because, as we already heard, it has a lot of potential to help us. It's one of the most promising technologies of many years. And then I want to talk about AI in the Middle East and what it means to us. So AI is really many different things. AI is ultimately an umbrella term. It means a lot of different fields, all designed different technologies, different algorithms, different techniques and methodologies to replicate in some sense human capabilities. From sensing, our ability to see and hear, computer vision and speech, our ability to process language, and from having spent so long in natural language processing, I can tell you there are hundreds of subfields in that, through to thinking and understanding data and processing and taking decisions, all the way to acting and autonomous vehicles and robotics, and anywhere where we see AI have an influence in the real physical world itself. So AI is a term that encompasses many things. AI is also commonly misunderstood. You know, there's a lot of myths around AI. For example, people will use AI and machine learning as terms interchangeably. Machine learning is just one subset of AI, albeit one of the most important. Computer vision, speech, and natural language, all these days more commonly powered by machine learning. Deep learning is also just a subset of machine learning. It's another type, but using neural architectures and big data to really scale the power. People believe outside of our field that AI can be easy, that it learns by itself, but there is a great dependency on data and accurate data, error-free data, bias-free data. And though there are a lot of tools that can automate some of the processes in machine learning, AutoML tools, and there are a lot of off-the-shelf AI capabilities, everybody's needs are different. The people whose data is processed will always be different. So there's always a great need for customized model. And there are a lot of reports that will say most AI projects fail. And one of the reasons they fail is that people really don't think about the return on investment. It can be quite a project to think through how you map the performance of an AI model to business and societal requirements, but it can be done. And it's actually a myth that most AI projects fail. As many non-AI projects, as many construction projects, as many industrial projects and new products fail as much as AI. So to say AI is an outlier in that sense is simply not true. And finally, AI is also a journey, an evolution of technology. AI has been around since the 50s. I used to work with one of Marvin Minsky's PhD students who did AI in the 60s and worked with the first ever chatbot, Eliza. But typically when we talk about AI today, we're talking about narrow AI, capabilities that have one or two key functions: to take a decision on X or to process data Y. You know, when we get further into that future, we start looking at artificial general intelligence, AGI, and that's when the AI becomes as capable as a human brain. And then onward to super intelligence, where the AI passes human capabilities. And that's what we call, that's where we get to the dystopia or the utopian future, the singularity. And for what it's worth, I do not believe, at least in my lifetime, nor our children's lifetime, the singularity will occur. I do not believe AI will reach that state, but it still has a very long way to go. So in terms of trends, there are a lot of technology trends that I could talk about. So we could talk about the scale of the new language models. Anyone who's heard of GPT-3, the language model that can generate incredibly realistic human-sounding text, yet without actually any understanding, and computer vision and the scale of things. But for me, the trends are always much more in how to succeed with AI. What are people doing when they want to do it right? So we recently released earlier this year a set of sort of priorities for how you implement an AI. I want to focus on the first two, but there are things like leading on risk and understanding responsible AI. The fact that errors will be made and there are risks in data, that we operationalize AI, that we understand how to scale and integrate. And the fact that it needs to be integrated with your business too. There's a lot of changes that require to understand and people. But the first of these is getting on board with boring AI. And we just heard that Bahrain Polytechnic is implementing AI to help with the operations. And that's really the key to AI successes. Everybody hears about all the funky, cool things that we're doing. We've all seen the demos of the robots and deep fakes, and these are very cool. And when you have a massive team of 500 engineers and researchers, these are the kind of things that you can do. But for most organizations, success is going to be in that cost reduction space, in that back office, behind the scenes thing. Forrester recently released a set of AI predictions, and they very much focus on those cost saving measures. And it's interesting because it might not sound good and it might not be the good thing for marketing, but it's where the savings will be, and it's what will prove the use case for AI in any organization. If you can prove a saving, then you can make your business case for then generating revenue, for taking bigger risks. Next, it's really about that upskilling. And again, we're seeing this greatly improve in the region. We are, admittedly, the Minister for AI in the UAE speaks a lot about the fact that technologically speaking, within AI and data science as a region, we are behind. But with the AI Academy from the Polytechnic, with Mohammed bin Zayed University of AI in the UAE starting within the next month, we're really beginning to see that groundswell in data science, in artificial intelligence, and the skills required to build this. But it's not just technological programs. You know, not all of us are suited to sit through a Coursera course on how to build AI. I don't need you to know Python, to know machine learning tools. But it's about understanding those capabilities of AIs and knowing what it's capable of. And so for non-technical employees to not get technical training per se, but to understand this new technical domain, to know what it's possible about so that they're able to conceive things. You'll hear a lot of people say a lot of things about AI, and my job as a consultant is to help people with AI, to help with their strategy, to help with their execution of AI. And I have a much better relationship with clients when they understand more about AI, because I know then that they can trust me. I know then that we're talking the same language and we're both being realistic about AI. So addressing these boring applications of AI and getting people on board with how we can use it is really key to moving forward. Of course, there are conflicts there. Kids want to get into AI so they can do the flashy, but most of the people that work in the field will need to embrace that they won't get to do anything that's really flashy. More than likely, they will need to build the invoice processing, the document filing, and the automation. But that's okay. AI is hard, and we need to work to make it a success. So this overhype that we hear about is both good and bad. In one thing, it means we're really talking about AI. You know, we've been through a lot of hyped phases, and there have been a lot of AI winters. What I did not know is that when I started my course at university, we were in the middle of an AI winter. And looking back, it explains why there were very few AI jobs immediately after finishing in the 90s. But there's talk that we're looking at another AI winter. Could this be true? Personally, I don't think so. And particularly in our region, the quote below is from a US government report. Significant strategic investments in AI will catalyze major scientific, technological, societal, and economic benefits. And for me, I'll be honest with you, this is part of the reason and how this applies broadly, why I moved to the Middle East 2 years ago. I've been in the UAE for 2 years now. In the rest of the world, you have the private organizations driving AI in development and academic institutions that have been around for 50, 60, 70 years. Edinburgh University, my alma mater, had been doing AI for a long time. But governments in most countries are behind. Governments are playing catch up. In the Middle East, in our region, the governments are driving the adoption. The governments are what is making it so exciting to be doing AI in this region. And so I think that's really critical for us embracing the technology and catching up with the rest of the world. And we see a lot of investments across the MENA region. This is a report from a year or so ago from Microsoft looking at investments made in AI. This is in acquisitions, in deals, in partnerships. And the important part is the pattern they found looked over 10 years. And they found a huge growth from the late 2000s into today in terms of investment. And this is only continuing to grow. This is continually growing as we see more partnerships open up, more academic institutions with AI, fostering more startups, fostering more technology. We see a lot more opportunity and money being spent in AI. But also, we're expecting it to generate revenue. And we forecasted on globally, but specifically for the Middle East, we forecasted that AI would add $320 billion to the GDP of the Middle East by 2030. And we see that across industries. So in terms of the biggest impact as a percentage, retail, accommodation, wholesale, anything that's direct to consumer, the public sector, these are pushing up to almost 20%. But of course, our biggest industries, construction, manufacturing, energies, utilities, mining, we're talking hundreds of billions of dollars of potential. Of course, what you're thinking right now, and as we started when we opened this, is COVID. We made these predictions some time ago. Do they still stand? Do they hold? One of Dubai's master developers, largest master developers, Emaar Corporation, announced just yesterday that they were suspending all new projects. That's a lot of construction that's not going to go ahead. So do we think AI still has that future outside of the immediate health benefits? I think you know where we're going, but of course it does. So AI is good at making predictions, but at PwC, we also track the sentiment and priorities of CFOs across the globe to understand how COVID was impacting their business, where they saw the changes coming. And some of the news gives you pause for thought. We ask people, which financial action is your company considering as a result of COVID-19? Implementing cost containment. 96% of Middle East CFOs, compared to 81% globally, said they're going to contain costs. 66% said they're going to defer or cancel planned investments, compared with 56% globally. This is very general and very broad. We took a broad sweep of companies, but that gives us cause to concern when AI is at the very end of the value chain. We talk about digital transformation, data intelligence, and then we have AI. Is that putting us at risk? On the flip side, however, which of the following are you planning to implement once you transition to on-site work? This was a survey back in the summer before people were really starting to open the offices again. Accelerate automation. In the Middle East, 62%, compared with half the companies globally, are exploring that automation of processes, that seeking for operational efficiency that so many of us have been predicting for a long time as one of the best uses for AI. What about the current situation will make your company better in the long run? Technology investments. Again, Middle East leading globally in recognizing that we need to invest in technology. And in fact, just a couple of months ago, and while we're still in the pandemic, and we don't know how we're coming out of it yet, in Saudi Arabia, SDAIA, the Saudi Data and AI Authority, announced their AI strategy at the Global AI Summit, which they hosted. And it is ambitious. They have high aspirations. They want to be among the top 15 countries for developing and applying AI by 2030. They want to train more than 20,000 data and AI specialists and retain them within the kingdom by 2030. This is ambitious, recognizing the importance of this technology, how important AI is to the region. But there are also very unique elements to the region that AI can help us with. We see things from a report from Accenture looking at volatile oil price. We're very dependent on this. We have been historically. If the world is locking down, there's no one out in their cars. There's no use in oil. How can we use machine learning to optimize our oil processes? Climate change and water scarcity. Very much issues that we're facing. But again, there are AI techniques, there are researchers looking at how can we best place solar panels and use efficient renewable energy across the city where we get most sunlight. Where can we find the water and how can we distribute it most efficiently? All our cities, all our countries are urbanizing rapidly. And how can we moderate this? The Dubai RTA, the Road Transport Authority, just announced their AI strategy. How can they use this to manage transportation within Dubai? High youth unemployment, food security, again, big issues where, again, we see Bahrain Polytechnic taking the lead in training students for this future. Data science and AI skills are going to be key for the next generation in seeking work in the workplace. So in finishing, I really want to leave you with three thoughts. In terms of what AI is, it's for me, it's about understanding the capabilities and limitations of the technology. You know, being able to implement it or being able to understand it, all our leaders. I will need the leaders to understand AI, and then we can work together to drive it. Unlocking its potential, finding the right use case. We do workshops, we do all sorts. I've talked many times about how to find the right use case, because that is key. Those first use cases that you use, that will be what proves to leadership, to stakeholders, that AI can be a success and it can make an impact. And in the Middle East, we might be behind right now, but with our governments driving, with our leadership embracing it, as we see today, and we will hear about in the next session, with our governments doing this, we will catch up. I have zero doubt. I have no doubt, and I'm thrilled to be a part of it. And in terms of my cautious optimism, I'll leave you with this, that His Excellency Omar Sultan Al-Alamar, the Minister of State for AI in the UAE, said, AI is neither negative or positive. As with every technology on earth, it really depends on how we, the people, implement it. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Scott, for your insight into the importance and growth of AI and into the aspirations of AI in the Middle East. Thank you very much. Next up on our lineup is the panel discussion, The State of AI, Executives' Perspectives. This session will be moderated by Mr. Ahmed Naeemi, Head of Digital Transformation and Project Management at the BIBF. Please join me in welcoming our distinguished speakers, who are Data and AI Ethics Lead at KPMG and AI Advisor to Standards Australia, Ms. Rossana Bianchi. Head of Research and Infrastructure, Artificial Intelligence Office in the Prime Minister's Office UAE, Dr. Abdelrahman Mahmoud. The CEO, National Cybersecurity Center, Sheikh Salman bin Mohammed bin Abdulla Al Khalifa. Project Director, Supreme Council of Health, Sheikh Khalid Al Khalifa. General Manager, Exploration and Development, Tatweer Petroleum, Mr. Yahya Al-Ansari. And Managing Director of BFG International, Dr. Samer Al-Jishi. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Amal. Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Thank you so much for joining us today at the AI for All 2020 conference, which is under the auspicious patronage of His Highness Sheikh Khalid bin Hamad Al Khalifa and organized by the Polytechnic Bahrain and the BIBF. We're up for an exciting panel today, and I would like to start by briefly introducing the sectors that the panelists are representing, as we only have about 40 minutes to steer the whole discussion and conclude sort of with a fruitful outcome and recommendation in relation to AI. So I would encourage all the esteemed panelists today to actually pitch in whenever they feel that they need to add any information or anything, even if I direct the question to any of the other panelists. We have today Sheikh Salman Khalifa and Dr. Abdelrahman Mahmoud are coming from the background of tech and cybersecurity sector. We have Sheikh Khalid is from the health sector. We have Mr. Yahya Al-Ansari, who's coming from the oil and gas sector. We have Dr. Samer Al-Jishi from the engineering and manufacturing sector. And also we have Ms. Rossana Bianchi, who is joining us from a consultancy background. So I may take questions from the audience throughout the session. So please, if you want to ask anything, please make it concise and to the point while asking it in the chat box that you have. And it should be relevant to the discussion that we're having today. So let's start with the general warm-up question just before we get into the whole discussion about AI and with the different sectors and different areas. We know that AI should be on the agenda of every organization, but currently it is mostly on the agenda of IT departments. Whereas many studies and reports have shown that AI must be on the agenda of top executives and decision makers, including board of directors in the organizations. Why, as leaders, they need to be up to speed on today's top technology trends and why should they place AI at the top of their agendas? I'm going to open up the floor for whoever wants to start.
So, if you allow me,
So
AI is an incredible new tool. I think we're all trying to get a grasp of how to use it in our business. And I think if we look at all the press that we see around the world, it is transforming business as we know it. And I think it's for every board member to decide how their business needs to leverage AI as a tool. So let's take, for example, Goldman Sachs. Goldman Sachs today, in their high frequency trading, is hiring 200 computer science engineers to build up their AI portfolio. Today, the majority of high frequency trading is done through AI. Split millisecond response time to changes in the news, what happens, what the impact on stock. These decisions are now being made with AI. And I think that is one major example. So we're talking about 1/3 of Goldman Sachs teams is IT driven. And so they've taken that informed decision, amongst others, is to invest in artificial intelligence to make themselves more competitive. Now, every sector, every industry is going to have the same impact, whether it is manufacturing, services. AI is going to play a crucial role in making themselves more effective. And I think every board member should look at how they can leverage AI to make their business more effective.
Thank you, Salman.
If I may add,
go ahead.
I think, in addition to providing, it's getting increasingly competitive. And if you don't use AI in your organization at some point, then you will definitely fall behind. But additionally to that, I think there's a very strong environmental impact that also could come in from the implementation of AI solutions in various industries and businesses. Particularly when you get into manufacturing and some of the physical types of business, then the use of AI solutions actually reduces substantially energy consumption, it reduces material consumption, it reduces wastage substantially. And today, that's something we really need to do on a global level, is to be much more mindful of the environmental impact. And I think boards are responsible from corporate responsibility to ensure that their organizations are aligned with this global goal as well.
So basically, you're mentioning that that will actually also, using AI will lead to big cost savings, basically, in the organization as a whole.
Correct.
Which will have a positive impact on the bottom line.
Absolutely.
And what about Dr. Abdelrahman from the UAE? What's your take on that element? Is it the same also in the UAE, where we have you have AI is on the agenda of IT, and it's not mainly on the top executives' agenda, or?
So what I usually say is, when you want to assess the impact of something that is currently happening, you always have to look at the history behind it, right? Or the history of humanity. We went through 3 industrial revolutions that changed the course of mankind, right? So that transformed the way that countries operate. Civilization is moving ahead. Now we're on the 4th industrial revolution. So you have a host of technologies around that, right? You have 3D printing, blockchain, Internet of Things. Yet AI is more prominent, right? It's always the focus of everything. It's at the center of this 4th industrial revolution. You have global leaders talking about it. Even the brightest academics talking about it. That this is transforming how governments are operating, how countries are operating. Now, to go to the impact that it's having at a very low level, I mean, in the health sector, for example, and radiology, AI is being heavily used in MRI devices, for example. I've seen that Siemens, Toshiba, they're implementing state-of-the-art AI techniques to reduce noise in these images that they're taking. So the MRI that used to take 40 minutes to analyze can be done in 20 now, hopefully in 5 minutes later. So.
Thank you so much, Dr. Actually, that leads us to a question I want to ask. we keep hearing and reading a lot about UAE's AI strategies, investments, and a lot of elements when it comes to AI. Can you please shed some light into what is the UAE doing in this field and why a governmental office was established in the AI field?
Well, that's a good question. So in 2017, the UAE announced the AI strategy, basically, which aims to make the UAE a leading nation in AI by 2031. So that means be a leader in developing technology, adopting technology, being really the go-to place for AI. Now, to achieve that, we have to look at it as in a holistic view, right? We have to consolidate all that effort into the direction that we want to head in. If we leave things as they are, you will not get to the outcome that we are looking at. So we established the Office of Artificial Intelligence, which is basically tasked to achieve that vision. Now, in this office, we have three main pillars. One of them is the capacity building, upskilling people, training, ensuring that the right training programs are there. Everything we do, the talent is at the core, right? So this is the most important thing that you can do, is build up the talent. The second pillar is international cooperation. So this is something that I always love to emphasize, and it's very important, is that you don't tackle AI as a single researcher, as a single entity, even as a single country. So we established numerous MOUs with other countries, what we call AI bridges, to exchange expertise. So we basically exchange talent, have joint programs, really learn from each other. This is the way forward. It's a collaborative effort, not a competitive effort. The third is governance. So we went, so throughout this past 3 years, we went through 3 phases implementing this AI strategy. We started by properly and deeply understanding what exists in the UAE in terms of AI. So we know that companies operating in this domain have been around for quite a few years. So we set out to understand and survey them, right? Understand what are their pain points. And then introduce regulations and governance elements that support them, right? We want them to grow. We want this ecosystem to thrive. So these are basically the 3 main pillars that we are looking at on the UAE.
Beautiful, beautiful. Thank you, Dr. Abdelrahman. Actually, I'm gonna get back to you about the capacity building element shortly, but we'll move into Mr. Yahya Al-Ansari. I want to hear your voice now, but I have a question for you. So when it comes to oil and gas industry, we all know that the timeliness of action is very critical. There may be huge financial incentives if, for example, oil production has been produced few minutes or hours earlier or faster. Can you advise us, Mr. Yahya, on the potential uses of AI in this field?
Good morning, everybody. Thank you, Ahmed. To be direct to the point and this question, and oil industry, actually, it is maybe one of the industries that has huge potential for implementing AI. Nevertheless, it's a bit challenging when it comes to the fact that AI depends heavily on data, accurate data, and the amount or volume of data. Usually, AI becomes more efficient when you have big data to deal with. And because of the business nature in oil industry, that it is more of competition between oil companies and international oil companies, sharing the data is a huge challenge. Nevertheless, AI actually, it's one of the major decision-making tools in oil industry and in oil companies, especially things related to oil price, for example, predicting the demand. This is very essential when it comes to staying ahead of the game and be prepared to deal with the production level. So I would agree definitely that, and this is only the business side of it. But if you look at the technology side of it, it's a huge, which most of companies today, oil companies, especially international oil companies. They have AI as a major tool to minimize the cost, optimize the operation, enhance the efficiency of their assets, and also maximizing the production, basically.
Thank you, Mr. Yahya. Just a fast question. Are we up to date when it comes to these data and elements using AI in Bahrain? Are we actually using any AI sort of applications in Bahrain? I keep hearing about this digital oil field over and over, but can you let us know what we are doing in Bahrain, basically in that area?
Okay, to start with, as a definition for or a background, what does it mean, digital oil? Basically, it has two sides, but let us go with the common understanding of digital oil, where we have the automation and data streaming as a main element for all the facilities and asset management when it comes to surface facilities, for example, having all the data flowing to a single point where creating a database, let's say a dynamic database, basically, allowing all the machine learning and from that all the way to decision taking. And mainly here is to deal with efficiency, the main objective. But if we specifically talk about Bahrain and Tatweer Petroleum, actually, we started this a few years back. Although it is I mean, people should appreciate that Bahrain field is a very ancient field. It's a very old field, discovered in 1932. So you can imagine the amount of legacy facilities and old wells that we are dealing with. In addition to all the new wells that we are reaching, more than 2,000 wells. And I'm talking about single field, which is Bahrain field. But we have this technology being used to, again, to apply preventive maintenance. For example, we have more than 500 or 600 beam pumps on the field, where we can really streaming data from all these pumps in order to maximize the production and have sort of predicting which pump might fail in a short time. So we go and do some maintenance to avoid dropping in production. So this is a simple example that we are using AI for.
Thank you so much, Mr. Yahya. Moving to you, Sheikh Khalid. Health has been under the spotlight since the start of COVID-19. And a lot of AI development has been taking part during that period. And a lot of people have reverted back to or start putting attention on AI as a technology where they're using a lot of, developing a lot of applications, using the data and all that. So how can the Health Council contribute in Bahrain, basically in expediting AI applications in the health sector, and what we are doing in that regard?
Very good morning. I think, yes, we started today's conference with Sheikh Hisham mentioning a couple of areas where healthcare has been utilizing AI to solve a lot of the issues, let alone the COVID situation we are in required quick action. And I think this is what artificial intelligence brings into healthcare, is quick decision making. And I think this has been very well noted. The Supreme Council of Health, we have a project which we call Sahati. The project is basically collecting all the health and medical information in a central repository. And I think this is the first part of an AI journey, is to be able to provide interoperability between the different systems that are in the kingdom. So we can apply artificial intelligence within one facility. For example, we have in Bahrain already, we have the automation of pharmacies, for example. But if we bring this into the national level, we are able to predict how we can better manage drug procurement, which costs millions when we compare it with the overall budget. So I think this is where we are heading towards, is being able to provide the data required for health AI initiatives.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Sheikh Khalid. One also question actually for Sheikh Salman. Cybersecurity has been talk of the town in the past few years with the growth of AI and other techs. You're now a CEO of a recently established National Cybersecurity Center. What kinds of threats we are creating through these technologies? Will there be sort of threats by implementing AI solutions, in your opinion? Are you seeing any of those sort of trends, something happening from your end that you can share?
As with cybersecurity, the attacker is always looking at basically either disruption or getting data. So the very nature of AI means that we are going to stream a lot of data, and data will be shared, and you'll have access to, for example, the intelligent oil fields. Now, these oil fields need to communicate into a network, and they need to either be sending information or an action can be taken. So that sort of opens up the attack surface. With AI, it's another surface that we're going to have to protect. We start off with IT, which is that's what we all know. We have OT, which is what's managing those oil fields, and we have IoT, that's even more another layer. So we have now that attack surface becomes a lot bigger. And so the work involved in protecting and setting up the infrastructure needs to be done correctly. So with any technology, one needs to do it right. I think that's the message is, yes, we are opening it up. We're having e-services coming up. We have our employees, because of COVID, working from home. And again, managing those oil fields or airports or servers. And that adds risks. And now all these attackers have cheap tools to work with, are very competent and very talented, and have knowledge in vulnerabilities and security, and know how to circumvent vulnerabilities and security tools. And now they have AI to help them. So it used to take them a lot more time to investigate, getting through the firewall, identifying strategic assets, start running those security tools or hacking tools that will take over these devices. That process took a really long investigative time from an attacker. But with AI, that's going to be a lot faster. So we need to be on the other side, more competent, more capable, and have the tools that will allow us to respond faster. So I think that is the AI is now becoming a risk, because not only are we going to use AI, but the attackers are using AI, and not will be using it, are using it.
Perfect. Thank you, Sheikh Salman. Actually, we've heard about the applications of AI now in different areas. And I want to hear from also Dr. Sam, but I'm going to come back to that. Now, we spoke about the cyber threats element and what we're doing in that regards. Ms. Rossana, I want to ask you, we've heard so many great applications so far in various sectors. Why is it that nowadays there's a lot of talking about digital and technology ethics? And why is it important that we address these challenges as we speak now? We hear about what happens after the end of jobs. How do we distribute the wealth created by machines? How do machines affect our behavior and interaction? All these elements are related mainly on the ethical side. So what's your take on that, Ms. Rossana?
Well, COVID has definitely shifted and changed the risk-reward kind of balance when it comes to technology innovation, and in particularly when it comes to AI. So on one end, we're seeing that we are demystifying technology. So technology is everywhere, and we are increasingly engaging with digitally enabled products and services. And we're also seeing a sort of excitement around the innovation agenda. And in fact, a global study that we launched as KPMG in August this year is actually highlighting highlighting that a number of private and public organizations are now seeing digital transformation and AI in the context of digital transformation as a must-have and no longer as a nice-to-have. Now, we are adopting these technologies at a scale and pace that is pretty much unprecedented for humankind. And this means that these technologies are not being used solely for the purposes of achieving and maximizing financial and economic benefits, but they can actually deliver way more benefits in the societal and environmental space. And so there is an implicit kind of rising expectation in the eyes of the public, but also in the eyes of the policymakers, that these technologies will be used for the greater good. And on one end, COVID has kind of shown how the tech for good agenda can actually be pushed and accelerated. But on the other hand, we've also seen that because we're adopting these technologies at scale, we're not actually taking a step back and really understanding what could be the unintended consequences of these technologies. And so there are two emerging themes that we're actually seeing. One is digital divide. We're talking about exciting applications of artificial intelligence, but in many countries, even Western countries, we still have the challenge around the offline nation. So we still have people that do not have access to network connectivity, that still do not have access to digital tools that are actually enabling the access to these products and services that are enabled by artificial intelligence. And we're also seeing across the board, actually globally, a pretty kind of low or kind of evolving level of digital maturity, both in organizations and also in the public. And these kind of results in the digital divide kind of challenge. I kind of work and live in Australia, and the Australian government, as an example, has set an ambition to become a digital first country when it comes to government services by 2025. And so now the topic of trusting these technologies and doing right by people and communities and societies as a whole is becoming front and center, because there is recognition that we're doing a lot of good things, but there are also many ununderstood or underestimated risks that we need to kind of explore and understand a little bit more. In terms of ethics, it was mentioned before that the scaled adoption of AI actually has significant environmental impacts, and it also has an impact on society. We have seen that in a data-rich environment and in a technology-rich environment, there are many things that go wrong. In the US, as an example, we're seeing facial recognition systems actually exacerbating, unfair practices and discrimination. We're seeing algorithms being used for recruitment kind of practices and discriminated against people with specific features despite comparable experiences and qualifications. We've seen also these algorithms being used by governments. As an example, for immigration and visa purposes, this was actually a case that was reported in the media in the UK, and these algorithms were actually flagged as racist because they were discriminated based on kind of hidden and unfair biases that are kind of featured in the data sets used to design these systems. So I kind of feel that we need to kind of revisit our appetite to invest in some of the use cases, not in the technology as a whole, but in some applications that are slightly kind of more controversial and that also have the impact to actually significantly change and impact our lives.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Ms. Rossana. I'm actually, because we have a huge number of panelists, I'm trying to link the questions together to make sense of the conversation. Actually, this question is for you, Dr. Salma. You basically lead a major organization, basically, or a company related to manufacturing and engineering. Techs used for the greater good, as Ms. Rossana just mentioned. A question from the audience. Are there any insights or achievements that have already been made in Bahrain with AI implementation so far? Can you list some examples from your industry, or an example for the sake of time from your industry?
Well, from my own industry, well, we've embarked on our Industry 4.0 journey about 3 years ago as part of Target being a national demonstrator of how Industry 4.0 would help industries to become more effective, to become more competitive, and to become environmentally as well more efficient. So far we've made substantial progress. The most difficult part of our journey was actually trying to develop an information gathering network. You know, the AI basically works on data, and in a lot of industries and businesses, as Ms. Rossana indicated, it's the digital maturity is quite low. And so the ability of organizations to, first of all, you can't really do much on AI unless you have data. And so the most difficult thing, I think, for a lot of businesses is to put together an information network and a data acquisition network to provide a substantial amount of data, put that in a data lake, and then be able to run either, you know, machine learning algorithms or AI tools and analysis tools to work on that. So it's taken quite a while actually to put together something like that, because even the maturity of data acquisition tools wasn't really quite there. We've been able to put together, however, a system in place. And just in our industry alone, we were able over the last couple of years to reduce, for example, just a simple example, our in-process quality defect rate, which basically is a combination of wastage or working errors and what have you. We're able to reduce that by the use of these modern tools by almost 80%, which is something quite substantial. And that's just the early part of the journey. We're confident that that will be reduced to almost 95% by the time we're done with the development of the project. So the impact is quite high. And I think that that's very encouraging for a lot of industries. But I think also, if you may allow, I just go back to a point that was raised by Mr. Yahya about data. So the value of data is quite, I think, underappreciated. So data is going to be the new gold. It's the digital gold. And whoever owns data will have an upper hand when it comes to the use of AI. And I think there's probably a debate that should be had, or a discussion at some time in the future, around who owns data, and do companies own their data and trade in it, and and sell it or license it out, or should data become kind of like public domain, and so people can have access to it and it can be used for the good of humanity as a whole. But if you go from a selfish perspective, if you own data, if you're able to generate and develop data, you're not only providing an advantage to your industry, but you're also building an asset base of something that could be quite valuable in the future.
Great, thank you, Dr. Sam. Wallah, this discussion is going really nice. I like the point. There are a lot of ways that we can get into in terms of talking about different topics. But I'm going to steer that a bit towards a bit of the talent element or the organizational structure from an executive perspective. We face a lot of challenges, or leaders face a lot of challenges nowadays in terms of the organizational structure. It may be a hindrance to sort of agile developments, and especially when it comes to these technologies, AI and all that, you need to get on pace or get on these technologies really fast. So can anyone from the panelists shed light in terms of how we should work, or how should we bring this AI implementations or AI ideas into our organization if there is a strict organizational structure on board?
Okay, so if you allow me, talent is going to be fundamental, one of the key fundamental parts, because if you have a wonderfully labeled data set that allows you to sort of build your models, if you don't know how to set up that data model and having practical knowledge of building that algorithm the right way, without, for example, the bias that we've seen in the recent times, how do we continuously improve that model? All that fundamental understanding of how to build an AI ecosystem in an organization, then we will see failure. It just will not work. We will see models that have either extremely high accuracy, which means that is not correct, 100% accuracy, which means they built the model incorrectly, or we're going to have a very low resulting algorithm. And so the competency and the practical knowledge, not the theoretical knowledge, but the practical knowledge of understanding the mathematics behind it, And how to take that model correctly and design it correctly with the data set, with the right checks and balances, that is the challenge. What we lack here is basically the formal method of building capacity. Mr. Abdelrahman and Mahmoud has said it correctly. It's capacity building. It's getting that fundamental knowledge out there and making sure we also build into this the mistakes that other people has made is we need to protect that information, avoid bias and misuse of AI. We have data protection laws that need to be taught to the students and to the users of AI to ensure that we don't break personal information and expose it in the wrong way. Because nobody knows what is right and what's wrong. But there are laws that govern that, and they are very strong, and they're very close to the EU in Bahrain. So ensuring that we build those models, have the data, and protect it in a practical way, and you take our students from beginning to end, then these students will be an excellent asset in bringing them into the workplace, and then go to either the healthcare sector, they go to the banking sector, or the industry, manufacturing industry, to help solve business problems and make companies more efficient. And that's my opinion.
Thank you, Sheikh. Ms. Rossana, I wanted to actually ask you on that element from an international experience and from a consultancy background. Will it be a great idea to have an AI team in every organization? Will that push development of technologies or AI in the organization itself and remove those hindrances in terms of the strict organizational structures?
Yeah, we're actually seeing large organizations actually heavily investing in having big data and kind of technology teams, and then having specialisms because, there is a lot of excitement around artificial intelligence, but the truth is that there are a number of other critical technologies that are also enabling the use of AI. And in fact, one of the shifts in mindset that we're seeing with COVID is that we're moving from the power of or, i.e. investing in new technologies inside us, to the power of and. So actually really exploring how we can use new technologies in combination to maximize value. And so when it comes to AI, as an example, we're seeing AI being used in combination with cloud, but also in combination with less sophisticated automation technologies such as robotics. So what we're seeing is you have pretty much two options. You have a centralized model where you have a center of excellence for artificial intelligence that serves kind of the various parts of the business, or you actually have a decentralized model where you have technical teams that are very close to the business, and so they understand the business processes and kind of the use cases and the needs inside out and develop solutions. There is no right or wrong answer. I think it depends on the strategy, on how you operate as a business. There is also an option to have a hybrid model, where you have kind of, some sort of delegation to the various business units, but also some sort of centralized coordination and governance. But I kind of feel that one of the key differentiator and success factors is not just thinking about new technologies, but the data foundations around those. Having worked with a few organizations in Europe, the UK, and now in Australia, we're still kind of catching up on the data management agenda, which basically means that organizations want to innovate and they're also investing in new technologies, but they are still grappling with data quality issues. They don't know who is actually governing and responsible for managing data across the organization. They don't actually understand or fully understand the data risk landscape because there are so many regulations around data risk, including privacy, that are actually kind of, duplicating themselves or are no longer fit for purpose in the digital age. So before kind of investing at scale around AI, I think, having the foundations right around data is kind of, a must have. And this is also reflected in a number of ethical principles or trustworthiness principles for artificial intelligence, like the data piece is particularly important. And I just wanted to comment actually on the question that was raised before this one. In terms of talent, I kind of feel that every single country is now addressing the challenge around talent shortage. Australia is a small country, so we are net importer of IP and also technology. But what is really fascinating is that the whole debate around the societal impact of artificial intelligence is now raising a question around, is having, a team of technical people enough to actually responsibly innovate? And the answer is No, probably no. And so we actually need to combine the technical expertise, which is very much needed, with also expertise in other fields, as an example, compliance, risk management, but also philosophy and anthropology. So the impact on people and human beings really requires, you know, a different type of skill set that needs to be combined with technical expertise. But going forwards, I think that we will see more and more of kind of mixed teams that will actually collaborate on designing and then deploying AI solutions.
Thank you, Ms. Rossana. Actually, because we're pressed in time, I'll ask a final sort of a question, and for each, each panelist can answer. Basically, do you think it's time? It's a question as well from the audience. Do you think it is time for Bahrain to adapt an AI strategy? Dr. Abdelrahman, Mahmoud, if we start with you, if you can tell us about UAE's experience when it comes to AI from a strategy point. Did you set an AI strategy, and what you're doing in terms of that? You mentioned that at the beginning. So if you can just shed light into that in a minute sort of explanation on it, please.
Yes, so the national strategy, what it did was it created a national agenda, right? So you have really the entire government now focusing on that as a single point, right? So the capacity building, as we mentioned, was one of the core pillars that every government entity now is interested in. In fact, one of the things that we did a bit differently, that was really one of the most important things that we did, was create a training program for government entities. So we opened a training program that, let's say, spans 9 months, and took really people who are mid to senior level from government entities and put them through a 9-month program that is quite technical, quite mathematically heavy for AI. When they graduated, they went back to their entities, and we call them the AI champions. They are now our AI champions. They bring the change from within, right? If you approach an entity, tell them, okay, this is what you have to do. They will not always accept it because we don't understand their problems. But when they build it up themselves, then that opens the door for collaboration. So announcing this strategy really brought everyone under that same umbrella, right? So you have the governance aspect. Everyone is working together to share data, to address these type of issues.
Beautiful. Thank you, Dr. Abdelrahman. Ms. Rossana from Australia, do you guys actually have sort of an AI strategy on board? Or?
Yeah. So we have an AI strategy, and actually what has been developed fairly recently is an AI action plan for all Australians, which basically means now that we have the strategic priorities clear and everyone is on board, what are the key things that we need to kind of focus on to make it happen? And there are a number of challenges and priorities that have been identified as part of that action plan. What I feel, a few countries, including Australia, can learn, from the experiences that we just heard about is actually having clarity on who is actually pushing the agenda around AI. In Australia, we have multiple voices that are actually providing guidelines on what good looks like from a legislative perspective and from a strategic perspective, but we don't have a minister for AI as an example. We don't have an AI office that is kind of fully dedicated to fully exploring this technology. And this is actually something that I feel, we can reflect on and potentially learn from other countries. It's also interesting that in Europe, we're seeing a similar trend now. So the European Parliament just published a recommendation for what the future of AI regulation could look like. And one of the recommendations is actually to establish an AI supervisory body in each of the members of the European Union. And so that is actually kind of, in a way, providing clarity. We have one voice and we have one supervisory authority that is responsible for enforcing regulation in this space. So hopefully we will also make some progress in this part of the world.
Thank you so much, Ms. Rossana. Dr. Salman, do you think that AI Bahrain should embark on an AI strategy?
Yeah, I think we've already started on this. So the Economic Development Board has been working for years to put together a strategy built around digitalization, leading eventually to AI. And one clear success was bringing in Amazon Web Services to Bahrain to have a major set of data centers out here. That's obviously a pillar, and we've transferred a lot of the government data into the AWS base as well. And also within the EDB, we've been working on the data protection and data privacy laws as well, and help to pass those through. as well. So I think we're working diligently towards an implementation of a national strategy. I think there's still a lot more to be done. And I believe that as my fellow panelists have said, capacity building is going to be very important, but also the way in which organizations can learn and adopt this. So Mr. Abdelrahman mentioned that you need to work from within, and you need to train people from within organizations. And I think that's also something I think we're a little bit behind. We need to work internally with organizations, both in public and private sector, and train people internally. And the way that this works, I don't think it's, a lot of organizations we've talked to in this area start to refer you to their IT department. And I think that just reflects a bit of a lack of maturity. This cannot be driven by IT. The moment you go through IT, it fails. The introduction of AI is something that has to be adopted at board level and at senior management level, and they have to champion it and then have internal champions as well, because it's so cross-departmental. You need to take AI experts plus your operational experts and put them together. And that's a key. If you don't do that, I've seen that it fails in almost all cases where that's not applied.
Beautiful, Dr. Sam. I think we started with that question and we are ending with that as well, which is great. Sheikh Khalid, what's your take on that?
I think we need a sector-specific national strategy. I think talking about the health sector, we're doing a digital transformation project, but we need to include AI in that. I think that, yes, as Samar said, it's required to come from top down. And this is what we are trying to do through the Supreme Council of Health is, combine all health entities, whether it's hospitals, whether it's regulatory entities. So bringing all this together will provide us with a solution that can actually be effective in applying change in the health sector itself. Yeah, I do agree. Yeah.
Thank you, Sheikh Khalid. Sheikh Salman, final remarks?
Obviously, I think there's a huge appetite in the country to implement AI. The problem is there are so many things that are blocking that path towards AI. And I think a national strategy will help focus everything, and resolve many problems that we'll have, whether it is capacity building, whether having the right expertise to transfer that knowledge to, whether we have the right policies that to enable us, and focus from the executives. And so, yes, a artificial intelligence strategy is going to be very helpful in expediting our path towards artificial intelligence.
Thank you, Sheikh Salman. Mr. Yahya, final remarks and your take on this aspect before we conclude the session.
Yeah, thank you, Ahmed. I think we can't talk enough about the importance and how it is crucial to have the artificial intelligence technology being used and applied, and I'm specifically talking about the oil industry at the oil ministry level. In fact, building the capacity and accelerating building the capacity, we have not only started a team within Tatweer Petroleum to bring that technology into the business, but also we have signed a joint agreement with one of the giant international oil companies called Chevron, really to look at the new discovery we announced about in 2018, which is Bahrain unconventional basin, in order really to speed up and accelerate our learning curve and really bringing that discovery into a production. And maybe this is one of the different ways or solutions to build the capacity in different organizations, maybe starting from scratch with a team within the organizations, depend very much on the organization size and nature of business. But other solutions is to join with research and development centers or technology institutes, or outsource it basically to build or speed up building the capacity. An industry like oil industry, I think it is not something nice to have, but definitely it's a must.
Thank you so much, Mr. Yahya. I think we can go on and on. I think it's quite interesting seeing a different points from different panel members, and I'm having like a list of questions from the audience, but unfortunately, due to the time that we have, I cannot continue further. I've been asked to actually stop the session now and move to the next part of the conference agenda. I would like to actually thank all our esteemed panelists today. Thank you for making time and being here today, sharing a bit of your perspective in terms of AI. We'll definitely hold other sessions, inshallah, that we will talk even further in terms of basically single areas like capacity building, the national strategy and all that. We're going to hold different sessions, but at a later time, inshallah, between the Polytechnic and the BIBF. So that we can further the development in terms of artificial intelligence in Bahrain. Thank you so much once again. Thank you for the audience for being here with us today. On to you, Ms. Ahmed.
Amazing insight there on championing for AI and the importance of a national strategy for AI for Bahrain and the world. Thank you, Ahmed, for moderating this panel discussion, and thanks to our esteemed panelists on shedding light on the uses of AI across different industries. Now we move on with our agenda. It's time for a 15-minute break. See you back at 10:30.